welcome back to Hot Flash Mama Podcast. On this week's show, we are doing part 3 of our 4-part series. We are getting close to wrapping up those 20 most frequently asked questions that women who are going through either pre or perimenopause or menopause itself that they may have just floating around in their head. This week, we're going to talk about brain fog, or as I like to refer to it, menopausal moments, weight gain. There's a lot of information there. Random hairs that grow everywhere. I'm going to really encourage you to find yourself a chin buddy, somebody that's willing to point those little beauties out that are just popping up on our chin and everywhere else. And then on the flip side of that, we have hair loss. A lot of people are experiencing the thinning of the hair, and I'm going to share my experience with you in this podcast. Last but not least, a very, very important topic, bone loss. A lot of people feel that they do not have to worry about bone loss at their age, but let me tell you, it takes years to have bone loss and years to rebuild. But the good news is you can rebuild bone. It just takes the right environment and the right ingredients, and I'm going to share those things with you. If you stay tuned to the very end, I'm going to share with you our last 5 top questions that we'll answer on next week's podcast. I do want to apologize and let you know the reason I haven't been on here in a couple weeks is my dear father passed away, and it has been really hard to jump on here. It's never easy, but I'm very confident that we will see each other again. I'm very grateful that you haven't forgotten about me and you came back. Also, my real quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, so before you start any nutritional or exercise program, please make sure you reach out to your doctor or healthcare practitioner before you start. Anything that I talk about, almost anything that I talk about, I will provide a link for you in the description of this week's podcast. I am definitely one of those instant gratification type people, so it's super convenient. Some of the links may also be affiliate links, so if you click on those links, it helps benefit the show, and I thank you very much for that. One of the first things I like to point out is that most of the symptoms that you are having are happening because of a fluctuation in your hormone production, or it could be that they are decreasing, and that is what happens naturally. So when you start balancing those hormones again, and I like to use the progesterone cream because I feel like it personally is the most natural form and it's easiest for the body to convert, I feel like so many of the symptoms go away. It is actually the imbalance of the hormones or the decline in certain hormones, but that gap that keep symptoms popping up. And just to give you a visualization, if you imagine a scale, I'm a Libra, so I kind of think in my mind those scales. And if you put something on one side that's not the same weight as the other, they either go up or down. It's that imbalance, either up or down, that can cause the symptoms that you're experiencing or that I was experiencing. It can also be that maybe both levels are either too low or too high. So that being said, I kind of want to explain to you what progesterone and estrogen do in the body very quickly. I'm not going to really go deeply into this, but progesterone is the hormone that helps. It's a precursor for other hormones, but it also helps to protect the baby during the gestation period. Pro meaning for gestation hormone, so progesterone. That is a natural substance that our body produces. And then we have our estrogen. Estrogen is actually a group of 3 different estrogens, but we group them together and just refer to it as estrogen. We produce estrogen in our ovaries, but we also produce it through the adrenal glands and the fat cells. We kind of have the fat cells to lean back on. With progesterone, it's through the ovaries and also the adrenal glands, but we don't have them in the fat cells. So a lot of times people, if they're extremely overweight or extremely underweight, will notice a huge imbalance when they are going through menopause. And that is the best for me. That is kind of a good rule of thumb. If we have fat cells, chances are we have a good amount of estrogen in our body still. Conventional medication and doctors generally want you to increase your estrogen levels. Our options are pharmaceutical products like Premarin, which again, I'm very big on breaking things down. And Premarin actually stands for pregnant mare urine. And that is a story in itself. If you want to Google it, I highly suggest doing that. It's actually torturous and sad. So I'm not a fan, obviously, of that. But estrogen is the go-to for most doctors, mainly because it gets results pretty quickly. Unfortunately, it doesn't last very long because a lot of people are actually good on the estrogen levels, but they're deficient in progesterone. So it can exaggerate the symptoms later on and open up a whole new Pandora's box of other symptoms. Not to mention, they've shown that elevated estrogen levels can contribute to breast cancer and other diseases in women. I share this with you because most of the symptoms that we're going to talk about today and along with the past episodes can actually be attributed to unopposed estrogen. What that means is on that scale, estrogen levels are very high and your progesterone levels are very low. So rather than increasing both or increasing estrogen, you want to raise those progesterone levels up. Again, somebody who's underweight may need to increase both levels. Progesterone, even though it is a precursor to other hormones, and it is the hormone that our body produces when we're pregnant to protect the fetus, it is still a precursor. So it's not just a female hormone. Both men and women use it. That's why I feel it can help with things like libido and balancing out your hair growth, things like that, which we'll talk about in a second. The first thing we're going to talk about is brain fog, or as I like to say, menopausal moments. The first time I went through menopause, I had no idea that brain fog was one of the symptoms. Thank God. Another reason why we have this podcast, because I want you to know what you're going through is not you going crazy like I thought. So there's a lot you can do. Start always first with trying to balance the hormones. But in general, a lot of us need help in that area, whether we're going through menopause or not. So I'm going to mention just a few things that I feel are incredible. They help me in a great way. One of them is fish oil. Fish oil is one of the best things that you can take for your brain health. Our brain is mostly water, and it needs to have that hydration and flexibility that the fish oil can help. Another thing is ginkgo biloba. It can actually increase the circulation and blood flow to the brain and help with cognitive thinking and concentration. Now, one of the products that I had talked about in the past is called Happy Camper. It is a stress reliever and it's fabulous, but it has a huge amount of ginkgo in there. Ginkgo is great for the brain, also circulation throughout the body. So I'm in love with that product, but you just need to be careful not to double it up with another product. There's enough in that product that you wouldn't need to take an additional brain formula. Of course, I'm going to mention water, because water, drinking half your body weight in ounces every day, is going to be super important when you are trying to have better thinking and less brain fog. The brain is actually 75% water and about 60% fat. So those things should really help with these symptoms. Another thing that higher estrogen levels, or what is referred to as unopposed estrogen, this may actually be responsible for the next two things. Hair loss, or even a male pattern baldness situation where you lose it on the top of your head or it thins on the top and also around the front of the face and the hairline. That can be unopposed estrogen. When our body is not producing enough of the progesterone, it can reach to the other organs like the adrenal glands, and it can produce something called androstenedione, which is more of a male not exactly, but more of a male result in our body. It can also cause us to start having little random hairs popping out everywhere, along with a thickening of a mustache. Okay, I have to giggle at that. I've never said mustache instead of mustache before in my life. It's a first time for everything. There are a few things that you can do to help with the hair thinning. Number one, of course, we always know, try to balance out those hormones. There's actually a study when people balance their progesterone and hormone levels, if that is the cause, that can actually clear up in about 4 to 6 months. They stop losing the hair. They start seeing a little bit filling back in. So that's really good news. Fish oil is always going to help with that, which we mentioned before. It's such a great thing to take on the regular. Okay, I mentioned I would tell you about my story if you haven't already heard it. So I had taken birth control that was a shot that was mostly progestin, which is a synthetic form of progesterone. Not the same thing, no matter what anybody tells you. Check out the molecular structures. Also do a lot of research on it. I was taking that, and not only did it cause me to go into menopause, but I also developed lupus, SLE, which caused me to have some bald spots on my head. And then I also had alopecia areata, which shows on the, if you look up the prescription, some of the side effects can be the alopecia areata. That being said, I struggled for years and years with bald spots and thinning hair. So one of the things I did discover was a shampoo that has Capixul in it, and I will post that in the links. But I have been using that for years. And as a little testimony, this last time, because I haven't had it in a minute, so I haven't had a bald spot come up in a while. But when it did come up, it actually did not become completely bald. It actually had hair that maintained in the spot, which was absolutely different from any of the other ones I'd ever had. So the only thing I can really attribute it to is the shampoo. As far as the chin hairs and mustache, what I can tell you is it's a really good thing to have a chin hair buddy. Just whenever they start to pop up, make sure you and your girlfriends are helping the other person if you see a big one coming out of the chin. And I always keep tweezers with me because natural sunlight, when you're in the car driving down the road, that's when you tend to notice them. So keep those tweezers handy, ladies. Bone loss is another thing that a lot of people don't feel can happen to them. They feel like osteoporosis is something that happens to the really old. That's just not the truth. Osteoporosis happens when our hormones are not balanced. It requires both progesterone and estrogen to remove old bone and fill in with new healthy bone. That's called osteoclast and osteoblast. That is necessary to rebuild our bones. And guess what? They can rebuild. As a matter of fact, new bone in the small bones can rebuild in about 3 to 4 years. And in the larger bones, it may take 10 to 14 years. So it's something that you want to stay on top of because the older we get, the harder it's going to be to rebuild those bones. Those are the hormones that we need. But the nutritional part is calcium and magnesium. Very heavy on the magnesium part because a lot of people leave that out. We've been conditioned to take calcium supplements with very small amounts of magnesium and vitamin D, but we need almost equal amounts. Calcium we get in our diet a lot easier than we get magnesium. Magnesium needs to be present in order for calcium to be absorbed. And if it doesn't absorb, then it turns up in other areas in the form of calcium deposits. Vitamin D, which is really important and should be in almost every formula, is also necessary. But you can also get that by being out in the sun for just a little bit. Now, the final thing I'm going to talk about today is weight gain. Unfortunately, it just happens. We've heard it forever that the older you get, the harder it is to lose weight. And that is absolutely true. We contribute a lot of that to the decreasing hormone production because you need those hormones to have the other glands function properly, such as the adrenal gland and the thyroid glands, the pituitary. All of these things require hormone production in order to stay optimal. That can affect our energy, the way we metabolize and burn fat, but it also can affect our stress levels. The adrenal glands are incredibly important to maintaining our weight. And the biggest thing that happens with depleted or lower functioning adrenal glands is you get that what we call a belly or a menopausal belly. It starts pulling fat to the stomach area. And that is actually a result of cortisol production from being under stress. Now, I mentioned before, back when we were talking about brain fog, that there's a really great formula that can help with cognitive thinking because it slows you down, but it has the ginkgo in it, so it can actually increase the brain function. The same formula will help you with your cortisol production, and that can actually help with the adrenal glands. It is, again, called the Happy Camper, and I will post that in the description part of this podcast. The other thing is your adrenal glands need to be nourished, not only by balancing the hormones, but also by giving it the nutrients that it needs. There's a great formula called Adrenal Caps. I am just a really big fan of it. It's super inexpensive. It has adrenal glandular in it, which can help the body rebuild properly according to the makers. And then it has supportive herbs in it. They also have a thyroid support formula, which has very similar properties. So these things can really help, along with progesterone, to combat that weight. Another thing that can really help with energy is the multivitamin that I take. It's called Life Essence, and it has been super helpful for keeping my energy levels going. It's something that I just can't live without. I just love intermittent fasting. I will post a book in the links, but IF is one of the best ways to control your weight and have more energy. And I'm going to do an entire show on intermittent fasting in the future because it has really helped my body balance out in a lot of ways. I've lost some weight with it, but I'm not, if I'm being honest, I'm not the cleanest eater when I get off the fast because I don't break it properly the way you're supposed to. And I'm kind of partial to a little wine, and I feel like that tends to keep the weight on. But I have lost some weight on it, but I get to eat what I want to eat when I do eat. Now, again, that's probably not the best thing because I probably need to be eating healthier. When I really, truly want to lose weight, if I do the intermittent fasting with keto or a low carb diet, it produces incredible results. My energy levels are also really high when I do intermittent fasting. I can't wait to share with you all the reasons why it's so good to do. But it also helps me get my water intake for the day because when you're not eating, you tend to drink a lot more water. Another surprising reason that we may have weight gain, unexpected weight gain, are antacids and stomach acid neutralizers like Pepsid or Tagament or Nexium. These things all deplete or stop the production of stomach acid. What does stomach acid do? It breaks down our food so that we can get nutrients out of it. And that can result in a lack of energy, undigested food that passes through the intestines. It can also lead to many other health problems that we don't have time to go into on this show. Along with a reduction of energy and hormone production, we tend to move less. And when we move less or drink less water, then we tend to get constipated and bloating. So I did another show on constipation, which can give you a really great in-depth protocol if that's something that you suffer with. So please check that out if that is something that you struggle with. Education is power, and it is the best way to help your body function the way you want it to. I hope this show has been helpful for you. I did want to say, if you find anything helpful or if you enjoy the show, if you could rate, review, and maybe share it with a friend, that would really help me out a lot. And don't forget to tune in next week when we talk about incontinence. Tingling in the extremities, you will be surprised that that can actually be a symptom. Fatigue, PMS symptoms during perimenopause symptoms, that's always a lot of fun. And we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the hormone replacement therapy that you can get from a pharmacist and what you can get at a health food store or online naturally. They're both natural, but do you know the difference? Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you next week on Hot Flash Mama Podcast.